I am fairly certain that by now most of you have either seen or heard of the most recent developer update. In essence, that entire video was one big, I'm not mad at you, I'm just disappointed. Now I'm obviously not going to beat dedicated news channels to the punch when it comes to covering this topic as fast as possible. What I did instead was lean back in my chair and observe. I've observed what happened in game, I have observed what broadcasters on Twitch said, what their chat rooms had to say, and also talked to my own Discord server. And I have figured that there are some very split opinions on the matter. This is exactly what I want to focus on today. I would like to kind of decipher what Jeff said in the most recent developer update, take a look at accusations of their player base being entirely in fault, and also rebuttals that they should simply be hiring more people to fix the problem, given that they are a multi-billion-dollar company, I think. Sound interesting enough? Well, let's get right into it then. Now the big question I want to answer today is, what was the purpose of that developer update? It wasn't supposed to hype us for new cosmetics, it wasn't supposed to keep us engaged in the community until new content comes around, and it just seemed very different in tone in general. The answer lies obviously in what Jeff mentioned in the video, but also the context in which he said these things. We gotta do a bit of reading between the lines here. Now I'm obviously not in Jeff's head, so all of this is just mere speculation, but let's do it anyway. Jeff Kaplan, as a representative of the entire Overwatch development team, has expressed his and his team's desire to want to work on new content. New animated shorts and new features are what they would like to spend their time doing, rather than having to invest manpower and resources in the creation of report systems and subsequent additions to that system that distribute punishment. It isn't only that it takes a lot of time to go through reports and validate whether or not the player in question deserves disciplinary action, as would be the job of people that are not game developers but rather customer service type staff, I assume, but also the fact that from a coding standpoint, developers that could have spent their time working on new features had to dedicate their efforts to these punishment systems. Argument here is obviously that they have the money to hire new staff. Now I'm gonna be playing devil's advocate here and assume that the reason Blizzard manages to sustain a high level of standard in all their IPs is because they don't just hire anybody. I would assume that they are very careful with who they hire to maintain their own standards, making the acquisition of new development staff a bit more difficult than you think. Jeff has mentioned that they made a significant investment into these systems that are merely supposed to punish players. Naturally, if your devs have to sit down to work on a reporting feature rather than noteworthy new features, that's effectively like losing money. These new features could generate additional hype for their game, whereas these reporting and punishment systems are more of a necessity, not something you necessarily brag about and not something that really increases your sales. So here is what I believe the point of that video was. This toxicity problem in their game has started to affect them financially, or maybe it has for a good while now. Jeff has been very open about that fact in his most recent video. And of course it is also affecting the game's reputation, with players leaving because of the toxicity and channels covering the topic left, right and center. If you are in a position like this, you can no longer keep quiet. So what is the best way of showing that you as a developer care while keeping costs low? Guilt trip the heck out of your community. And it makes sense, just let me explain. By dedicating an entire video just to this topic, they show that they care. It revitalizes people's trust in them as a company and a development team. So even if the changes are not immediate, it makes people feel like something is going to happen in due time. Furthermore, it is a message that pretty much spreads itself. Discussions surrounding the game's toxicity problem have been so frequent on a bunch of platforms that this kind of message from the dev team themselves is most definitely going to make content creators talk about it. And so they did. Pretty much every major Overwatch channel on YouTube talked about it, and even broadcasters mentioned, if not watched the video on Twitch, further spreading the message. And not only that, people in-game started to talk about it. It's not only the massive reach of over 1 million views in just a couple of days on their own video, but also the hundreds of thousands of dedicated viewers that heard of the story thanks to their favorite YouTube channels and broadcasters. And popular streamers like Taimu and Tim the Tatman dedicated entire streams to the idea of PMA, positive mental attitude. And whether they do it for the sake of entertaining their viewers or not, they are further spreading the message in both the content creation space and also in-game. Naturally, this is not automatically going to fix the problem, but it revitalizes people's trust and gets them to talk about it. Now, don't get me wrong, people who are just inherently toxic will continue to be toxic. That's not gonna change their attitude. But do you have any idea how many people are now going to think twice before they go off on their teammates? I'm talking about just your average player here. And not only that, we might even see an increase in frequency of use for the reporting system on PC, with players finally believing that their actions contribute to a less toxic environment in their favorite game. And all of these effects they have now caused with an absolute minimum investment, far cheaper than sitting your devs down to work on code for these punishment systems that you have to keep brainstorming about as a director. They have openly admitted their own fault in the matter, accepting the fact that they have failed to implement more solid solutions for this problem and promising that they will keep adding on to it to combat toxicity in the game. That, my friends, is guilt tripping 101. They don't just put the blame on us as a community, they admit fault themselves and express their desire to want to work on things that are more exciting for us as fans, like new features and animated shorts. Now, I'm obviously not saying that they are not genuine. That is for all of you to decide for yourselves. None of us are in their heads, so we don't know what they are thinking at the end of the day. But what I am proposing here is that they chose their words very carefully with very deliberate intent, and I can't even be mad about it. It was a brilliant move from a marketing standpoint. It is a win-win for all of us. If this message actually contributes to a less toxic environment in itself, they managed to do so in a very cost-effective way and keep working on combating the problem itself. How can anyone who thinks twice about this be mad about it? What I do want to add as some sort of food for thought at the end of this video, however, is the fact that they have most certainly dug their own grave in this regard. Many design decisions were made that effectively contribute to the creation of a very entitled and subsequently more toxic competitive community. That's right, I am proposing that they implemented things in their own game that effectively make players more toxic, or at least even more toxic. And if you think to yourself, boy, I sure have nothing to do right now and that sounds like an interesting topic for a video, then feel free to check out my upload regarding this very subject that I made earlier this year. But this is me done for the days. I talk about the brilliance behind Jeff's most recent developer update. If you enjoyed this video, then by all means do let me know by dropping me a like on your way out. Have a wonderful day and I hope to see you all next time.